December 7, 1941. The early morning sky over Pearl Harbor is quiet, almost serene. Sailors move along the decks, coffee cups in hand, unaware of the shadows growing on the horizon. Suddenly, the calm fractures. Bombs tear through hangars. Smoke rises like dark pillars against the blue sky. Ships heave and tilt as fire and chaos spread. Somewhere else, in a nuclear lab in 1986, engineers follow a routine test, unaware of the tiny missteps that will ignite a disaster that blankets Europe in radioactive clouds. Across centuries, from icy battlefields to crowded cities, human decisions ripple outward. One miscalculation, one ignored warning, and history itself bends. It begins here, in moments of quiet that would never remain. History is full of moments when a single human error reshaped the world. Yet, these errors rarely appear suddenly. They emerge within environments of tension, ambition, and incomplete knowledge. In the early 20th century, Europe teetered on a fragile balance of power. Nations armed themselves, alliances formed and hardened, and leaders assumed deterrence would hold. Misjudged intentions, overconfidence, and rigid pride set the stage for a conflict that would engulf millions. In the scientific world, the story is no different. Engineers and physicists, confident in calculations and machinery, often ignored small anomalies. At Chernobyl, a series of minor decisions, compounded by flawed reactor design, escalated into a catastrophe that sent radioactive clouds across borders. On the oceans, Titanic's builders and captains trusted technology over caution, assuming the unsinkable ship was impervious to disaster. Even in politics and diplomacy, misreading an opponent's motives or underestimating social unrest has toppled governments and empires. Across eras, human mistakes share common patterns: pressure to succeed, lack of complete information, assumptions taken for granted, and the dismissal of warnings. Each misstep carries consequences far beyond the individual, rippling through society, technology, and politics. These are not stories of chance, they are stories of decisions, repeated errors, and the subtle build-up of risk. The build-up to history's greatest mistakes often combines ambition with miscalculation. In 1914, Europe's tangled alliances and nationalist fervor created a tinderbox. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, leaders assumed localized action would contain the crisis. Instead, misjudged intentions, delayed communications, and rigid military timetables ignited a global conflict. Similarly, in the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union navigated a landscape of incomplete intelligence and high-stakes nuclear brinkmanship. Misinterpreted signals could have triggered devastation at any moment. Even technological advances carry hidden risks. Engineers at NASA trusted simulations, ignoring small but critical warnings. On the Titanic, officers relied on the ship's design over visible ice hazards. In each case, the environment amplified human error, compressed time, limited information, and overconfidence. Leaders and experts believed they controlled outcomes, but circumstances evolved faster than their decisions could respond. Across centuries and continents, mistakes were rarely isolated. Political, technological, and human factors intertwined. One misread message, one ignored caution, one overconfident assumption could cascade into disaster. Each error was a turning point, a moment when history could have gone another way, and often did. From these patterns, the angles of human error begin to emerge, revealing the forces that shape catastrophe. Human error is rarely simple. It plays out across multiple dimensions, each magnifying the consequences of a single mistake. The first is the human angle: fear, pride, and pressure. Commanders, scientists, and leaders often act under extreme stress, believing they are making the right call. At Pearl Harbor, Japanese planners misjudged the U.S. response, assuming American forces would be slow to retaliate. At Chernobyl, engineers bypassed safety protocols, convinced the test could be controlled. In each case, personal judgment collided with circumstance, and confidence became a hidden enemy. The second is the technological angle. Machines, no matter how advanced, are extensions of human understanding. Systems that seem reliable can fail when assumptions are wrong or safeguards are ignored. The Titanic's watertight compartments were innovative, yet engineers underestimated the scale of the threat. In early nuclear experiments, calculations failed to account for rare but catastrophic chain reactions. Human trust in technology can blind us to its limits. Finally, the political angle magnifies mistakes. Decisions made in isolation or under secrecy can spiral uncontrollably. Alliances and rivalries pressure leaders to act decisively, often without complete information. Misreading intentions can spark wars, while delayed action can allow disasters to grow unchecked. Across history, these angles, human, technological, and political, intertwine, forming the invisible architecture behind every catastrophic misstep. Beyond human, technological, and political factors, mistakes also unfold along strategic and moral lines. Strategically, errors often arise from assumptions about opponents, geography, or timing. In 1812, Napoleon underestimated the Russian winter and overextended supply lines, turning a bold campaign into disaster. Military leaders frequently miscalculate, believing the enemy weaker or more predictable than reality shows. In business and politics, the same principle applies. Overconfidence in strategy can magnify small errors into systemic failures. The moral angle is equally revealing. Decisions made under ethical compromise or self-interest can have far-reaching consequences. Colonial administrations ignored local dissent, fueling uprisings. Industrial leaders cut safety corners to save costs, leading to preventable accidents. Each choice, often justified in the moment, accumulates risk, eroding the margin for error. Human, technological, political, strategic, and moral dimensions intersect in ways that make mistakes both inevitable and catastrophic. Minor misjudgments ripple outward, creating events that transform nations and societies. From misread signals to flawed calculations, these angles illustrate a recurring truth: history is shaped not only by knowledge and power, but by the limits of human decision-making. These converging angles build toward the decisive moments when errors stop being manageable and start reshaping the world itself. Moments when the consequences of human misjudgment become unavoidable. April 26, 1986. Inside Reactor Number 4 at Chernobyl, technicians prepared for a routine safety test. Alarms sounded, but schedules and procedures pushed them forward. Control rods were withdrawn, coolant levels dropped, and a small miscalculation set the stage for catastrophe. Outside, the night was still. No one could see the swelling danger within the reactor core, where temperatures climbed to unprecedented levels. Half a world away, on the Atlantic, Titanic's lookouts reported ice ahead. The bridge assumed the ship's design could withstand any threat. Officers delayed maneuvering. Water met steel at an angle no one had anticipated. Across eras and oceans, a pattern emerges: small errors magnified by overconfidence, timing, and circumstances. In these moments, history holds its breath. The consequences of misjudgment are poised on a knife's edge. One final decision, one overlooked warning, will transform quiet confidence into irreversible disaster. In Chernobyl, the reactor surged uncontrollably. Steam pressure tore through the core. Explosions shattered walls and launched radioactive clouds into the night. Operators scrambled, alarms blaring, but the chain reaction could not be stopped. The world was forced to watch a technological miscalculation escalate into a public catastrophe. On the Titanic, ice breached multiple compartments. Water spread faster than anyone anticipated. Lifeboats were lowered too slowly, confusion reigned on deck, and a ship celebrated as unsinkable began to sink into the Atlantic. Lives were lost, families shattered, and confidence in human ingenuity faltered. Even in warfare, history repeats itself. At Pearl Harbor, the initial strike was swift and decisive, but miscalculations about response and timing ensured long-term consequences far beyond the immediate destruction. These turning points reveal a single truth: when human error intersects with complex systems, whether nuclear reactors, ocean liners, or armed forces, the moment of collapse is sudden, unavoidable, and transformative. From these junctures, the immediate aftermath begins to unfold. The immediate consequences were devastating. In Chernobyl, workers and firefighters faced radiation doses far beyond safety limits, while nearby towns were evacuated under chaos and confusion. On the Titanic, over 1,500 lives were lost in freezing waters, while rescue ships struggled to reach survivors. Military miscalculations left Pearl Harbor vulnerable, and fleets scrambled to respond. Across these events, emergency responses were improvisation that revealed both human courage and the stark limits of preparation. The broader consequences reshaped societies, technology, and policy. Chernobyl prompted sweeping reforms in nuclear safety worldwide, while the Titanic disaster led to stricter maritime regulations and lifeboat protocols. Pearl Harbor drew the United States fully into World War II, altering the global balance of power. Each event left a lasting imprint. Human error drove innovation, caution, and policy changes. History was forced to adapt, learning from mistakes that could never be undone, and demonstrating how the smallest missteps can ripple across generations. History shows that human error is both inevitable and consequential. Pride, misjudgment, overconfidence, and overlooked warnings have repeatedly reshaped nations, technologies, and societies. These moments reveal the fragile balance between knowledge and assumption, action and oversight. Yet, they also illuminate resilience. Disasters provoke reform, spark innovation, and teach lessons that endure across generations. Every major mistake is a reminder that the course of history is never fixed, and that understanding our errors is essential to shaping a safer, wiser future.